So again, one more time, hello and welcome to the ID Talks. This year, the entire year, ID Talks will be focusing on the topics of mental health and well-being. Mental health and well-being of young people especially are at the core of European Youth Goals and the European Youth Strategy 1927. And we are trying through this ID Talks to bring more attention, to bring more understanding, and eventually to support ending stigmatization on mental health issues. In 2023, SALTO Inclusion and Diversity Resource Center, that has been hosting ID Talks already for the 6th season, is partnering with Mental Health and Youth Work project. It's a network project done by a network of national agencies to contribute to the discussion on importance of youth mental health and well-being, as well as to highlight youth workers' role in young people's well-being. I would like to invite our colleague Paavo from the team of Mental Health and Youth Work project to give a few words, welcome words, as we are starting the series on mental health and well-being. Paavo, you have the floor.
Moi, hello, kalimera, sveiki, merhaba, ciao, den dobry, everyone around Europe and world. My name is Paavo. I come from Finland. I work in the Finnish National Agency. That means that we are administrating European youth programs, Erasmus Plus and European Solidarity Corps. And under these, the money that we have under these programs, we wanted to organize together with 14 other countries a project that will focus on mental health issues in youth work in general. And our idea is to, first of all, bring out more awareness about what mental health actually is and how you can promote it with young people. We want to develop the competences of youth workers so that they can help young people to take care of their mental health. And we want to include young people themselves in peer activities, informing each other about it, reducing the stigma and being active about how to promote mental health. And we're super happy to work with SALTO Inclusion and Diversity and ride on the ID Talks, because we share same kind of aims and objectives, and we're happy that we can use the ID Talks as a vehicle to bring these topics to you. So we hope that you will get more aware and more motivated to take care about mental health after these series. Enjoy. Bye.
Thank you very much, Paavo. Before I introduce today's topic and our amazing speaker, let me also remind you a bit how ID Talks works. After these words of introduction, our speaker will take over to present, to give the input on the topic of the day, and then we will have an opportunity to speak in smaller groups, to share impressions and come back with questions and to have a live discussion. Overall, we are planning to have this activity for 90 minutes, like always, and we really, really hope that you will stay with us until the end. It is my pleasure, honor, and also brings me a lot of joy to present today's topic and speaker. Today, ID Talks Mental Health Explained edition. You will hear many things about what mental health is and what mental health is not, what mental health is really about, how mental health is perceived and interpreted, and how are young people today doing regarding mental health and well-being, what we should know and what we should pay attention to and what we should be prepared for. To guide us through this interesting discussion, we have a very knowledgeable and experienced expert guest speaker with us, Maria, Dr. Agorastou, and I hope I am saying your name right, is a clinical psychotherapist, psychology professor, and clinical supervisor at Hellenic American University in Athens. Throughout her 20+ years experience, both clinical experience, teaching and research experience in the United States and in Greece, she worked to understand the impact of systemic and individual trauma on well-being and sense of emotional agency of young people and adults, especially those who come from disadvantaged groups such as disability, sexual orientation, and poverty. She's a strong proponent of a holistic view on well-being and mental health. And it is my pleasure. And yeah, I'm also very much myself looking forward to learn a lot from you, Maria. You have now the floor.
All right, thank you. Can everybody hear me? Yeah? All right.
Yes.
So I'm really happy to see so many countries. It looks like we're in a Eurovision Song Contest today, you know, and I'm just like performing. So I don't know how, you know, let's see how that's gonna go. So when I want to welcome everybody, you know, I see a lot of people showing up, which says a lot about the interest that people have on what human health and what mental health is, especially post-COVID, because this is where, you know, that was the cutoff point of the majority of people in the world trying to figure out what's happening within them when the circumstances outside are so unpredictable. So having being invited to give this talk, as you can imagine, I had a download of stories and data and schemas and knowledge and graphs and statistics. So I kept adding and adding and adding, and I ended up with this 100-slide PowerPoint where you know, everything looked very important for people to be able to do. But at the end of the day, the basic question is, what's the actual story that each one of us carry, and what does this mean about mental health, and how we're able to see mental health in a different way and well-being in a different way, and how our stories inform our present and our future. And this is where I want to go with this presentation. I know we have breakout groups at the end, but I'm going to be asking for some feedback in between, so you'll help me just get an idea about the assumptions that you carry, guys, in terms of your own selves. It doesn't have to be very detailed. You don't have to, you know, feel exposed about it, but just give me some feedback in terms of, okay, so this is a general idea that I'm carrying around, you know, mental health from my background, my family, my country, because the cultural differences here and the cultural elements could play an important role, right? So let's get started. Okay, so let's start with the basics. Let's normalize mental health. And this is the first question for you guys. Is well-being and mental health the absence of disease? Is it the absence of disease then? You know, who is mentally healthy? Is somebody who doesn't have any issues, doesn't have any problems? Somebody who is perfect, well-medicated, totally perfect in therapy, can write a whole book about it? It's impossible, yeah. So mental health is health, and that is one of the important aspects that we need to start thinking about, right? This separation of mental health and physical health being two different things, it is one of the biggest biases, one of the biggest mistakes that we're making as humans out there. So I'm just looking at the chat. Everybody can jump in. Everybody can participate. Mental, physical, social health. Happy person is the person who can live in if everything is going wrong. Spectrum depends on the points of view, you know, from east or west, right? So we have very different. So we have different opinions about this, but you know, the essence is the same. That considering yourself mentally healthy does not necessarily mean that you have no issues around your mental health. So in answering this question, I used most of my experience and most of my the feedback I get from students and clients. So if it's not the absence of disease, then what is it? So well-being is rather the awareness of how far we have gone from our true selves and that we're consciously and actively working towards coming back to it. People do their best with the level of consciousness they have. So understanding this will greatly increase your chances of awareness and where to go from here. Now, the idea of the true self, right? I just put it just a little bit in there. True self denotes a sense of self based on spontaneous, authentic experience and a feeling of being alive, having a real self with little to no contradiction. And I'm going to invite you once more on the chat box, right? You hear, and we hear a lot about this essence of people, well-meaning individuals, right? Friends of ours, relatives, the media, giving us this advice of just be yourself. You know, I don't feel good. Just be yourself. I don't know how to deal with this. Well, just be yourself, right? How helpful is that as an advice? To be yourself. What does it even mean to be yourself? Let's hear it. If you have any comments around this, because, you know, it's not very helpful. It's a canned response. Yeah. No one teaches us how to be yourself. So a good question is, what self? Which one? Is this because we all have different aspects of ourselves, right? So which one is the be myself? What if myself is a very angry and hurtful individual? What if I feel very timid in front of other people? What if I escape and avoid conflict? What if I self-medicate? Yeah, it's very confusing, right? It is not very helpful. And it is something that's going around again and again and again. You know, don't worry about anything, just be yourself. That in the concept of us understanding mental health and ourselves, you can understand that it could be, and I'm going to use a very psychotherapeutic term, which is actually a very common term, gaslighting, right? So this is the essence of us convincing ourselves that this is how I need to be, this is how I must be, there's no other way around it. So be yourself, although well-intended, it does not actually express of what it means, because ourselves are conditioned beings. Ourselves are not cookie cutter approaches on day-to-day basis on behaving the same way at the same time with everybody. So be ourselves, just be yourself is not a very helpful notion, although getting into understanding who our true self is a worthy pursuit. And this is what I want us to look around today. What does it mean and how do I discover what my true self is and what my true self is not? Now, if you're working with youth, which I know most of you do, understand that developmentally, those ages between especially around the age of 12 till 21, this is actually the time where people are, quote unquote, looking for themselves. Developmentally, that's where they have to go towards. They have to experience, they have to experiment, they have to interact, and they have to figure out ways of who they are. So as the adults in the room, how do we help them get a good, healthy sense of self? We're moving to a very different approach on how we see health in general, not only mental health. And this is a global kind of aspect for you to get. I want you to start using this as a framework, first of all, towards yourself and then towards others, right? So we do move away from the medical model of seeing mental health as a mind disease that needs to be fixed. And we're going to a more integrated approach, asking different questions. So think about this type of questions, how different that sounds like with what's wrong with you, what's the medical model, what is the symptom, what is the medication or the treatment that we have to get. So we can start with this question: what happened inside me as a result of my experiences? The majority of the times it's not what's happening, even though our experiences could be very traumatic, is what has happened inside me as a result of this experience. How did I feel about myself? What stories have I started telling myself about my sense of worthiness, my sense of livelihood? And if I didn't, who was around me to comfort me in that? Did I have enough support to make sense of those experiences? When you start asking yourself this type of questions, you're going to get a very different aspect about who you are and who the people you're working with or the youth you're interacting with is. Another good question, how have I tried to cope with stress and anxiety? What did I do? What instinctively my nervous system pointed me at in dealing with stress and anxiety? Did I over-medicate it? Did I drink? Did I withdraw? Did I just shut down? Did I fight? Was I being reactive? Did I get angry? Did I get rageful about this? Another good framework question. What was modeled to me at a young age in terms of how to repair conflict, how to manage anxiety, how to perceive myself and others? Did you grow up in an environment where, again, well-meaning but very stressed parents didn't know how to cope with this? With stressful experiences, with life's problems, how did they deal with it? Were you a witness in huge fights, or were you a witness of just problems are just swept under the rug? Was there any open communication about this? Was I modeled a healthy way of repairing conflict and not confusing, the repairment of conflict with arguing or fighting with somebody? Because this is what we see, is people not placing boundaries because the identifications in their mind is placing boundaries equals conflict. So you can imagine that if that's what you think it is, then you're going to try to avoid it, right? Another framework question. What was and is acceptable in my reality as a valid way of coping? What is being encouraged? What have you been reinforced to adopt as a means of you keeping the peace? So withdrawal, right? I'm just shutting out, I'm out. Silent treatment. I'm not going to talk to you. I'm going to punish you through my silence so you can get it. Stonewalling, that is a very specific psychological term, but as you can imagine, right, it's a stone wall. There is nothing there. You're just looking at a wall, and you talk and talk and talk, and you get no response whatsoever, none. So was this an acceptable, valid way of coping? Or were you fighting to have your voice heard? What was it? This is at the essence, this is at the center of mental health and well-being. What happened inside me as a result of my experiences, and how did I cope with it? Who was around me? What did I learn as a response? What did I learn as a result of this? And in the here and now, how am I carrying this model right now? How do I see it manifest right now in my adult life? So far, so good. This is as a, framework, and this is a very essential questions we're asking in psychotherapy, and we're asking with people who are working with, especially with youth. If you want to keep something from this, is asking young adults, understanding and asking them what stories are happening inside them. We're storytellers. Humans, we keep telling stories again until the day we die. We tell stories about ourselves, about others, about experiences. So what was the story? Permanence of mental health. We need to have a graph just to get an idea, right? As you can imagine, that's a lot of things right there to see what would be a predisposing factor, what was dealt to us. Genetic factors, factors related to pregnancy and birth, early childhood experiences, the family environment, the social circumstances, the physical environment, the education we got, the employment, the work conditions, and housing. You see that, this is a very interconnected kind of predisposing element there that affects the way we see ourselves and others. Now, the good thing about, regardless of the predisposing factors, as adults and as agencies that we're helping mediate this kind of cards that we have been dealt at a young age is our own emotional and psychological agency, which is what we're going to talk about. But this is the mediating factor. So the society and culture, I guess, you can see play a big role. But in terms of our mental health, what are individual resources in the present social context that can help us mediate the predisposing factors that were not very favorable to us? You see that the consequences of us being at the center of the predisposing factors, what was dealt to me and what I see happening right now is our own beautiful human self with the assistance of the environment. So the predisposing factors will affect, of course, the level of well-being, how we perceive ourselves, our physical health. This is something that, the physical health, I think it's part of another talk, but we have a mounting evidence about the connection between emotional and physical health. This is non-negotiable now that the immunity of our organization is going really down when the psychological and emotional health is not going very well and is going untreated for a while. Psychiatric symptoms, of course, the knowledge and the skills we acquire or we don't. Now, a big one, the quality of our relationships. Have you ever, thought about how come some people it's very easy for them to have good quality relationships, social, friendly, romantic relationships, and some others cannot? The amount of sexual satisfaction we get, how we use the service. Do we make use of the services? Do we have access to the services? Do we know that there are services available to us? The level of productivity. Now, imagine this when we talk about the level of productivity, right? Because that's what I get a lot. If our default state is survival, and we have normalized the survival state, that we have to go, and do. Will that go against our sense of productivity? Because productivity needs creation in it, right? It needs creativity. So we're either going to be creative about something or going to try to survive. So productivity is greatly affected, and productivity here, it's not, it's put on the basis of us feeling creative about what we're doing. So think a little bit about this. We're putting ourselves within this almost bipolar essence of I am in survival mode and I have to create in it. And these two are mutually exclusive. And then we beat ourselves up for not being able to be productive and creative enough, whereas being in survival state is not even conducive to being creative. You see that cycle, how it's going? Public safety, non-medicated, rageful individuals going out there. Morbidity, the substance misuse. This is a part of the coping that we do. So are we using substances to cope with a sense of anxiety, a sense of depression, a sense of being far from ourselves? Burden on family and friends. Being depressed for 6 months, it is part of the parcel of being depressed is not being motivated, right? So of course, there will be a burden there. And of course, social handicap, how others see me and how I use the system to support me. As you can. Good so far? I can talk for hours. That's why I stopped asking. I can talk for hours about this. All right.
Good, good, good.
Okay, thank you. So let's take a minute to ponder in the following statement. I'm going to put it in the next slide, but these are the questions I want you to have in mind, right? What comes in mind when you see, you know, what I'm going to show you? What concepts, emotions, resistance, and evaluative terms automatically pop up in your mind? So use the chat box to contribute. So what comes to mind when you say it? And if there are any concepts, emotions, resistance, or evaluative terms, like evaluative terms meaning good, bad, positive, negative, functional, non-functional, I didn't have it, I wish I could have it. Whatever comes to mind, let's say it. So this is a very old actually term from one of the reprints by Winnicott's books, but it says this following. So I went backwards, right? I went to the basics for us to understand what is happening. Nothing takes place in emotional growth except in relation to the environmental provision, which must be good enough. Now, Winnicott did not talk about perfection. He did not talk about amazing environments and perfectly psychotherapeutic aspects of our parents. He said that emotional growth happens when the environment we're in is good enough. So let me see in the chat, what words come to mind with this? Good enough, good enough. Yeah, what's good enough? What's good enough? Calm, harmony, balance, yeah. Supportive, conflict to grow from, excellent. Resilience, yes. Balance and support, self-improvement, safe. Comfort zone, balance, compassion. Difficult to determine, to get sometimes, yes, exactly. Trusting, supportive, safe, steady. Listen to young people. Elif, that's great, exactly. Listening to young people we're working with. We might be the only support they have. The one-directional perspective, caring. Different environments possible. Future perspectives in terms of seeing myself growing, I guess that's where Felipe from Portugal says. Showing empathy. Being there. Presence, right? Presence. Good enough is presence. Good enough is not perfect. Helping them realize and verbalize their interest. Active listening. So as you see, you can check the chat box. You will see a lot of input about what it means. Now, somehow Winnicott got this, and he was right about it. But then we forgot about it. I don't know what happened, but what he did is, with his research and with his guidelines in terms of how do we support mental and emotional growth, this idea of good enough was actually a very good point for people to be able to understand that, A, I don't have to be perfect as a parent, as a colleague, as a partner, but I have to be good enough. I have to be able to support certain things. Of course, Winnicott goes and has specific criteria and what good enough means, but we somehow, as a society, forgot the good enough part, and we went to this black and white thinking of, well, if it's not good enough, I'm not going to do it. It has to be perfect about it, and we have to just fighting reality to the ground in order to feel at least that we're good enough and enough. So if those of you in the audience did not feel that your environmental provision, and we're not judging now why, right? It could be parents, it could be teachers, it could be the entire culture you grew up in was not good enough. I want you to start realizing what it would mean and what it means to be good enough, at least personally, to each one of you, right? And consequently, what it means for the youth that you are working with to be for you to be good enough support. Good enough, take off your shoulders the perfection thing of and the highly healed aspect of yourselves. You need to be good enough, right? Let's see a little bit more on this. So what is good enough environment? He used the Latin sine qua non. That's how he mentioned it. So without which not. So without this environment, some things are not possible or they're quite difficult. The basics that we know for a good enough environment. Now, before I move to with this, good enough environment, now it is you and yourselves as well as adults. This is not the mom coming to give you this. This is start with how you provide this good enough environment to yourselves. So we're talking about safe and secure enough, emotionally, physically, financially. There is a very, there's a term that I think is very underestimated in today's culture, which is predictable and consistent. Not perfect, predictable and consistent. We know this to be true because without this aspect, trust cannot be built. What else is good enough? Caregivers that know how to take care of themselves first. I don't know from, your perspective, what does this mean? We can, keep notes and use this in our breakout groups, but culture plays a huge role in this, on what it means for caregivers to be able to take care of themselves first. In the Greek culture or the Mediterranean culture in general, there is a glorification of parents not taking care of themselves at, sacrificing their lives for their kids. This is a glorification of an attempt to give alibi to adults who did not take the time to regulate enough and to feel a sense of worthiness apart from their kids, regardless of their kids, because you can imagine how that can go, right? If I grow up thinking that I'm responsible for my mom's lack of education, lack of mental health, right? Consistency in the provision of attunement, which will in turn assist in emotional self-regulation. Now, these two elements, attunement and self-regulation, are quite, maybe two of the most important aspects you can take in terms of how am I doing in terms of mental health? How am I doing with myself? Am I attuned with me and am I emotionally self-regulated enough? Healthy attunement, the reactiveness we have to another person is the process by which we form relationships. Emotional self-regulation, the ability to modify or control our thoughts, emotions, actions, and words. Now, in each slide, whatever I can, I have put a statement of how it actually feels like, sounds like, looks like when we say it to ourselves. So what does it mean to have a consistent provision of attunement and self-regulation as a child and then as an adult? I am safe enough to express my needs without fear of being punished, scolded, or shut down completely. And if it cannot be done at the moment, I'm confident that I'm still accepted and loved. Right? I mean, just this statement, imagine how much trust and potential will bring to a child. That I'm attuned with another human being is I look in your eyes and I can validate your experience and I can say, something, you're right about this. I'm sorry you feel like this. It must be horrible. It must be hurtful to be like this. I'm here, whatever you need. This is such an elemental aspect of human relationships that it's very sad that we need to go to therapy to do it, to learn how to get this skill. The majority of research shows us that right now, in terms of attachment theory and healthy attachment, there is a broad conflict around the percentages, but I think they're usually 40% are that's the high number, 40% of healthy attachment adults, and then the rest of the world, 60%, were just going around in unhealthy ways of attunement with each other and self-regulation skills, right? And you can imagine what's happening in our interpersonal relationships, work relationships, ourselves and the system. So attunement, again, before you think of somebody else outside of you, I will keep encouraging you to take this parent that did not exist or existed, this adult that existed or didn't exist, and turn it towards yourself. How attuned are you with yourselves, and how self-regulated you feel with yourselves first? We'll go into detail how to go into self-regulation. So in the absence of this prerequisite, as an individual, what is happening? We form a fragmented sense of self, going back to like, which self? Well, I don't know, because one parent told me this, one system told me this, one school told me this, one lover told me this, one friend told me this. So I don't know which self, whatever they told me. What are we saying when we have a fragmented sense of self? My worth and value are dependent on things outside of me. And since my needs are not being met, there must be something wrong with me. How many people have said it? I've said it so many times in my life, so many times, like something is wrong with me. There's no other way. Somebody else got the memo and I didn't, so many times, even in therapy, like, well, yeah, I didn't get the memo. Second aspect, very important. Now, the list that I have provided here are not exhaustive, right? I'm giving you just the most important aspect. 6, attachment at the expense of authenticity. This is such a major part. If my whole life is dependent on me getting liked by others, because me getting validated, me getting accepted, if my whole life revolves around it, it's because I didn't get it. I didn't know how to do it. Nobody gave it to me. This will trump authenticity. Attachment is at the base of survival. So if my sense of self and my sense of being liked and valid and validated and worthy is outside of me, then of course I'm going to do anything to get this. And of course I'm going to hide aspects of myself that I feel might threaten attachment. This is where the phrase I put there, I need to be accepted and valued, and therefore I will hide important parts of myself that I feel might threaten attachment. Will I be my real self, or will I be my authentic self when I have been conditioned to believe that if I ask for something, I get shut down, or, I should be ashamed of myself to do this? I will not do it, you guys. I will not go to my authentic part. I will just hide to get my needs met. What does it mean? Staying in unhealthy environments and relationships. I cannot lose this because it's important for my survival. This is what the subconscious is actually telling. This is not, most of the time, it's not actually a conscious statement. Now, third, this is a good one. This is where we're working with every single day. We adopt survival tactics in order to ensure acceptance and validation. How do we do it? Number one I see is overcompensations through wealth, fame, academic achievement, a lot of women, a lot of men, material health, name it. Now, there's nothing against it. I have nothing against wealth, fame, academic achievements, having the things that you want. But the motive is what we need to be looking at, because a healthy enough motive is these things are supplementary to my sense of self. They're not the reason why I feel a sense of self, because that means that anytime I lose those, then what happens to my sense of self is outside of me, right? I have to keep chasing this. And this is what we saw in COVID, because during the quarantine months, majority of psychotherapists, we had to work online with hundreds of people that have within a week lost everything that was serving as a point of reference for them outside of them. So they just stayed there with themselves with no sense of self, or with a very distorted sense of self. People pleasing and lack of boundaries. I'm sure if we do like an anonymous poll in this globally, like how many times, like, are you people pleasing and, lacking boundaries out of fear? Like, I mean, there should be like an 80% of people like, yeah, I do that. This is how we learn to survive. This is how we learn to cope. Self-medication, drugs and alcohol, we're going back to those aspects of, I need to get out of this emotion. I need to get out. What's easy to do? I need to get out. There is a story here. Again, there's always a story. And live in a constant survival mode as it manifests as nervous system dysregulation, anxiety, depression, panic attacks, etc. So it makes sense, right? Makes sense. Now, how trauma affects the brain? All of this are traumatic experiences, not being validated, not feeling good enough, working with people who don't feel like this. So how trauma affects the brain? You need to remember 3 areas: the prefrontal cortex, hippocampus, and the amygdala. What do we do? You look at this. The prefrontal cortex is where rational thinking is happening. When we live in constant fear, this area of the brain shrinks, and the amygdala, which is the fear center of the brain, is hyperactive. The hippocampus, which is responsible for memory and differentiating between past and present, works to remember and make sense of the trauma. With consistent exposure to trauma, it shrinks. So the 2 basic operational centers of the brain, the prefrontal cortex and the hippocampus, who help us make rational decisions, remember, create joy, be creative, they're shrinking, and we're working with fear. We're like in the cave, we're back in the cave. So we do have memory loss, lack of rational thinking, cognitive distortions or negative automatic thoughts, black and white thinking, catastrophizing, nothing is working, cognitive dissonance, what I feel and what is happening are different, and then, there's a clash there. A latent fear response, for me, that is the most important aspect, fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. It's latent. We don't get it. We have normalized that this is the way it is. We have hypervigilance. So that means that we're out with our antennas up, screening for threats. Everything and everyone should be a threat and could be a threat. There's this intense fear of abandonment and non-survival. Our memories are frozen in the past, and we have constantly these emotions of anger, hopelessness, shame, rage, and withdrawal. With all of this, what assumptions have you carried from childhood culture systems that are justifying survival mode as the most effective way of living? Right? This could be big concepts that, you have to work hard on a daily basis to succeed. You have to fight to the ground, otherwise you're lazy. Now think about what assumptions have you carried from childhood culture and systems that are telling you that you feeling stressed, anxious, hypervigilant all the time is the right thing to do. So these are some of the assumptions that I've written down from my clients, from my clinical practice, right? Asking for what I need makes me selfish. Everything needs hard work. I need to work hard for everything. I need to earn love in order to be accepted. Learn to become obedient at the expense of my true needs. Life is hard. Learn to deal with it. Everyone is anxious and has problems. Accept it. Placing a certain boundaries means conflict. I better be quiet than being a burden. And everything else that you guys mentioned, right? all of us have a story to tell. Our lived experiences are important. And this is an aspect that we didn't get enough validation. So we can do it with each other. The more we become aware about what well-being and mental health is, the more we start giving permission to ourselves to validate ourselves, we can do it with each other, right? Now, the statistics give us that 1 out of 4 citizens, that's a lot of people, actually, 1 million people, report the story of anxiety. These are diagnosed, right, and panic attacks, and 1 out of 7 report the story of depression. So I'm either oriented towards the future, that's my anxiety, my panic attacks, I don't know what to do, everything seems like out of control, and 1 out of 7 story of depression. What happens I'm frozen in the past, you see, the mind in trauma. Now, psychological imbalances, however, are not the cause, but they are the symptom of our trauma. Our limited sense of self and our effort to adapt and adjust to stressful environments with limited external and internal resources. So I want you to think about this question. It's a little bit more philosophical and ethical question, but I keep asking this. Are we trying to become good in fitting in very unhealthy environments? Is this a measure of our well-being, our capacity to adjust in a very sick environment? Something to think about. This is something that, is going around. Okay, where is my part in this? What do I need to do from my part? Because this is my story. And what is it actually a very unhealthy environment that I am forced to adjust, I'm forced to adapt, and do I have any resources to just get out of this? Now, our ability to cope in a healthy way has been greatly compromised by several factors, but our assumptions play an enormous role on how we perceive our capacity to do so. Our story tells us what we can and we cannot do. We're highly relational beings, and our interaction with our environments matters, as well as our ability to be ourselves. I think that ties, the whole past with now. How is the story, taking shape? Now, moving forward requires looking back. I have here a quote that a lot of my students know, and this is from Bessel van der Kolk. This is the book, The Body Keeps the Score. And I am using this in a lot of trainings and a lot of presentations, just because I think that trauma is not this huge event that everybody needs to happen. It has to happen to everybody, something huge to justify that I feel my experience has been traumatized enough to warrant me taking care of myself. You see what I'm saying? Because people come to therapy and they say, well, what I have is not very traumatic. And this takes away a lot of, the validation that humans need. So this is a lovely quote that, it's very human from Bessel van der Kolk, that we have learned that trauma is not just an event that took place sometime in the past. It's also the imprint left by that experience on mind, brain, and body. The imprint has ongoing consequences for how the human organism manages to survive in the present. Trauma results in a fundamental reorganization of the way mind and brain manage perceptions. Keep the word perception here, right? It changes not only how we think and what we think about, but also our very capacity to think. There is a saying that says, if you think you're a hammer, everything will look like a nail, right? Have you heard of that? That if I think that everybody's against me, or if I think I'm not good enough, well, everything actually around me will sound like this. So the first idea, one of the first things is to normalize what trauma is. It doesn't have to be some horrible, huge event to justify our need to take care of ourselves. Now, the APA refers to trauma as an emotional response to a terrible event like an accident, rape, or natural disaster. Yes, these are very horrible traumatic experiences. And immediately after the event, shock and denial are typical. We know that. Longer-term reactions include unpredictable emotions, flashbacks, strained relationships, and even physical symptoms like headaches and nausea. perfectly valid. But looking at trauma from such a narrow perspective invalidates our experiences to feel certain emotions and doesn't help us identify other forms of trauma that are important and threaten our sense of well-being. So, any event or series of events that made one feel overwhelmed and unable to change the course of one's life. Think about this. It could be a breakup, right? Examples could be abuse, poverty, lack mentality, or living constantly in fear of lack. I cannot pay my bills. I'm constantly afraid of this. I'm out of work. These are traumatic experiences that what they do is they activate the amygdala. That's why I showed you the slide before, right? That's trauma enough for the brain. Emotional neglect due to caregivers' poverty or mental health issues. Identity issues. Of course, this is huge. You know, one of the most victimized groups of people out there is the LGBTQ community. Disability issues, and then the combo disability and LGBTQ. Oh yeah, that we're talking about a lot of bullying and harassment and neglect and emotional aspect there. Race, ethnicity. Like you understand that actually being part of a specific group is traumatic based on the experiences that these people are exposed every day. Then bullying in schools, bullying at work. Weight issues, and in general, physical appearance perceptions. And any combination of the above. Again, what I want you to keep from this is don't wait till something is so justifiable, horrible, to tell yourself that I need to take care of myself. To ask youth, to work with youth and understand that what they're going through is traumatic. Now, in such circumstances, then, and without any systemic or social support and new skill development on how to deal with them, isn't completely normal to experience anxiety, depression, disassociation, self-medication, withdrawal, overcompensation, etc. Isn't it? Like, why are we wondering? We gaslight ourselves. The system is telling us that this is not traumatic enough. We have no resources. What are we going to do with it? So if one of the most prevalent aspects of trauma is a differentiated perception about ourselves and others, isn't then expected that our coping strategies would be survival tactics? I don't see in any supermarket any little boxes that say healthy coping skills, buy one, right? We just picked from our parents, school, friends. So like, yeah, I guess this is okay. Everybody's doing it. Everybody's doing, I'm going to do this. And I have no right to do something else because this is not traumatic enough. I'm a guy, I don't cry, right? I'm a woman, I should be like quiet. No, I'm not doing this. So in a nutshell, trauma and traumatic experiences, even in the form of daily stress that goes unregulated, keyword regulated, in any aspect or form would alter our perception about what is possible for us and what will greatly affect our sense of agency. And I love, absolutely adore this element of agency for all of us. What does it mean to have emotional agency? We say I'm an agent, right? The capacity to be an agent, to act purposefully and reflectively. Now, agency depends on the biological, social, and cultural context that inform and shape who we are. So I'm a master of who I am. That's what agency means, most of the time. Even if I'm out of it, I can get myself back to it. But agency is more than a mere effect of these contexts. Psychological agency also involves the capacity for imagining and creating potential new, different ways of being. We start having resources of how to cope differently, on how to deactivate the amygdala, right? And to start activating the prefrontal cortex, and how to feel more present. And being as such cannot be explained purely in terms of its biological, social, or cultural determinants. But I want you to get what the agency, how does it feel? To feel that you start creating agency. So where is our true self? Is here, is us feeling a sense of agency. Starting to Throw away the things that will make us forget who we are and will make our sense of agency diminish because somebody else says it, because I've been doing it for so many years, because, you know, my resources said this. So a healthy sense of agency, this is the 0.0. You know, we have personal, proxy, and collective. Just focus on the personal now. What are some of the basic elements? Autonomy, self-regulation, psychological empowerment, self-realization, empowerment through advocacy, self-advocacy. This goes to proxy, you know, if I'm doing it for somebody else, and collective, of course, but I want you to focus on the personal aspect of this. This is our nice, calm, cool, and collected self, where we need to go to regardless of the, I don't want to curse, of what is happening, you know, outside of us. Characteristics of a healthy self-agency: aware of our story and how it affects our current state of being. This is metacognition. This is lovely, you know, metacognitive skills. Oh, I'm not what I thought I was. I'm not a prisoner of my past anymore. Reflective of our assumptions and beliefs. Is what I'm thinking true? Says who? It's a good question to ask. I'm thinking that I'm not enough. Who says that? Like, really? Who? Is it true? I have or I am developing emotional regulation skills. I'm committed to not be thrown like a pawn regardless of the circumstances. The word commitment is very important for our mental health and well-being. My sense of worth is independent of what others think and say. We'll talk about it, how we can do this. I'm assuming full responsibility for my feelings, thoughts, and behaviors. I validate, I have a right to feel, and I am doing this to myself without being dependent on others doing this for me. I advocate for my needs, I validate my own experience. I don't have to be fully healed to be enough. All feelings are part of the human experience, and I understand that they communicate something to me. Now, what can I do to bring me back to my true self? That's a lot, but I will write an article about it. So understand fight, flight, freeze response, calm my nervous system down by. So the first thing is come in touch with your body, guys. You know, okay, so if what I'm feeling is all over the place, and if I understand that my amygdala is activated, and if I'm breathing differently, what do I do? So understand first the biological aspect, the neural aspects, right? Try breath work. I have a list of resources at the end: meditation, moving the body, walking, physical exercise, tapping, connect with nature. Nature is lovely. It reminds us of, oh, you know, I need to be here. I'm good here. This is home. Your body's fight or flight response plays a valuable role in keeping you safe. But it can also react based on false alarms. Practice situational awareness, mindfulness, and rehearsal. In other words, identify, process, and comprehend critical elements of information about what is happening. Use your senses, guys. Is this really true? Knowing what is going on around you. Use your sense more than your thoughts. Other ways. Be present with emotions. Follow the RAIN process. I have the RAIN again at the end on a video, you know, for you guys to do it. Recognize emotions, allow them to exist, investigate, and naturalize. In the investigation part of RAIN, there's a beautiful question that says, what do I believe to be true about myself and others when I feel this way? Is this true? Assume full responsibility of how you feel and commit to stay calm, cool, and collected, regardless of the circumstances. This is something that I get a lot. Is this wrong that I feel this way? Why? Am I doing something wrong? So no, all emotions are acceptable, part of my human experience. They don't mean I'm doing something wrong. They're just messengers. It's a GPS system. Commit to embrace life outside of the survival mode. We need to stop normalizing survival mode. I don't know how else to say this. We need to start normalizing mental health and mental health wellness and being okay, being calm enough. Not happy all the time, but we need to stop normalizing survival mode as the best way to be successful. Teach your body emotionally how to stay in a responsive rather than reactive mode, right? Seek therapy if possible and adopt other healing modalities. And, you might guys have feedback on this and something else you're doing. Now, final points. This is it. The human brain has an enormous amount of neuroplasticity. That means that it adapts and creates new neural pathways as you embrace a new way of being. Your ego self will resist by warning of potential threats, stay present, self-regulate. You can imagine, right, trying to make a change. Of course, the ego is going to be like, where are you going? Like, this is not safe. You're not good enough for this. You cannot make it. La, 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 all these voices. Healthy self-agency requires our ability to widen our window of tolerance to discomfort as opposed to engaging in survival tactics. Our stories are important as a frame of reference for growth, not as a box to cage us in limited potentiality. And repeat again and again, if I live in my mind for too long, it's time to move my body. Just get out, do something, wash the dishes. And these are some resources. The Rain is a mindfulness exercise. It's very nice. Breath work, Wim Hof will do it for you. Tapping, deactivating. These are all for deactivating, the system and rewriting a little bit the story and understanding other people's experiences as well. And meditation, inner child healing. So these are very short, all of them, like 10 minutes, 15 minutes, but these are go-to that you can start utilizing and then using it with other people as well.
Evcharisto, Maria. In the meantime, let me read some of the questions. And few of our participants are wondering how we can get out of survival mode, especially now when it seems like the whole world is in one big crisis. I know this is a huge question, but maybe 2-3 tips.
I think if you go to the last part with the resources, you have, when we're in survival mode, understand that this is the entire body that is activated, right? So, and being in a survival mode for way too long means that this is our default mode. That's where we're going. Defaultly, we go there. That's it, the end of the story. So you understand that it's going to take a little bit of practice to develop a different skill. In other words, deactivate the amygdala. Breath work is the first thing to do it. Like if you want to get something really fast, do breath work because the oxygen is going to release the carbon dioxide right away. I'm just giving you very practical steps now, right? So you will start feeling the difference. Now, I want you to keep something in mind. When you experience contrast, big contrast, the way I feel when I'm relaxed and the way I feel when I'm in survival mode, that is a good sign. When the contrast is big, is a good sign because that means that you start emotionally training your body to be in a more calm state. And when it goes to survival mode, it feels really bad. So when you feel really bad about being in survival mode, that means that that's not your place anymore. You don't want to live there anymore. It's like the nervous system is like, we're not doing this anymore. It feels really horrible. So let's go back to it. So doing breath work, staying present, connecting with your breath. Breath is all you have. Connect with it. Stay present. What does it mean to stay present? I'm going to consciously write sticky notes. I will not escape. I will stay present with my emotions, like put it everywhere. This time, I'm not going to use my go-to survival tactics. I'm just going to stay present with it. So there are different ways to go with it. I will say that being present and doing breath work will be the first thing to do, as long as it's the tools you're using because you're committed to feel differently about yourselves. Because, guys, can I be a little bit cynical? I say this again to my students. If we keep on going on survival mode, we're just going to die. Really, we're going to die early, and we shouldn't. This is what is happening. The body cannot do this.
Thank you very much. There are also many questions about the process of follow-up to this talk. For sure, you will receive all the relevant materials. Then there is a block of questions, different questions about true self. You have been talking about true self in the beginning of your presentation. I would just maybe single out this one, which is maybe a little bit more, again, hands-on rather than theoretical, how to start working on becoming your true self. What can we do to reconnect with our true self?
Well, think about this. Our true self is where we feel. First, we need to identify, right? How do we feel when we're our true selves? What are keywords that come up with, when do I feel most like myself? That's an open question, right? For everybody. When do I feel the most like myself? That will help you identify the feeling, the emotion that goes behind the being myself. What does it mean? So if I'm present, or if I'm gardening, if I'm spending time with my kids or my pets, or I'm having a nice meal, I am organized, I'm taking a walk, when are the experiences on your daily life that they make you feel connected? In other words, they don't make you feel want to escape, because everybody's sense of self is different, right? But the emotions behind it, they're pretty much the same. There is a childlike quality in our true self. I am enjoying the present. I am curious about life. I am hopeful. I can deal with life. I can wear a mask to deal with something else, but behind this mask, there's my true self, right? I can adjust, but I will not forget to go home to my true self. What do I do every day to remember this? I do breath work, meditation, walking every day to remember it. Yeah, the body keeps the score. It is kind of scary. That's looking at the comments. The body does keep the score. That's for another talk. Parenthesis. You know, have you ever been in that where, oh yeah, you think that you dealt with something and you emotionally regulated and you have filed it, and then just one experience will wake up these horrible emotions and these post-traumatic flashbacks. You're like, where did that come from? I thought I worked on it. That is where the body keeps the score.
Thank you
But
very
going
much.
to the true self, you know, there are a lot of ways to do it. Some of the aspects I put here are good ways to start, because you cannot find any true essence of yourself if you're constantly on survival. So please deactivate your sympathetic response first in order to see what is behind this. But the rule of thumb for the true self is this childlike calmness. Not all-time happiness, but it's this sense of safety. I'm okay. I am agent. I'm the agent of myself. I feel I have emotional agency. I feel good in my skin, right? Maybe this is something for another training, guys, like an actual training on how to do this with, you know, with more examples, right?
Thanks a lot. Also,
oh my God, there's so many people. I just see you guys now. I kept seeing my screen.
Maria, at some point we were almost 160 people here, and this is really many for the ID Talks. And the fact that just 10 minutes before the end, we are still over 100, I think shows one more time how important is the conversation about mental health and well-being. There have been some questions that are maybe more to the team. Yes, there will be more topics on mental health this year. The whole year, 5 topics in spring, 5 ID Talks in spring, and 5 topics, 5 ID Talks in autumn are all dedicated to mental health. This first one is to explain and lay the ground. The other ones are going a little bit more into more specific questions and issues. And one of them, something that you have been mentioning also in your questions and comments, we will be talking about social media and how it affects mental health and well-being of young people. We will be talking about global issues like climate change and how this is affecting young people. We will be talking about self-care of youth workers and how youth workers can take care of themselves first before attending to young people, something that was also highlighted in Maria's presentation. So please don't forget to come back every second Wednesday, 1 p.m. Central European time to continue being with us. Maria, and there is also... Yes,
yeah,
please.
guys, leave feedback for me, because I'm going to write an article and, you know, there could be follow-up with this, you know, but hopefully I did not, you know, I covered as much as I could. I know it's very dense information, and being 20 years in this field and being a clinician for 20 years, you can understand that sometimes I might overdo it. But hopefully there's
And
something
thank you.
beautiful out of
And
this.
thank you for reminding this as well, because the article is not only based on the talk, but also on the conversation that we have in the chat.
Yeah.
So we are going to forward your questions, your
Mhm.
comments, and your feedback to Maria, that she can inform her article with this information that you have been sharing with us here.
Yeah.
Maria, maybe if you would like, I see that we have more and more questions coming,
I know.
and this is amazing. This is very, very inspiring. I think not only to the speaker, but I think to all of us as a community of people working with young people and caring for better mental health and well-being for all of us. I would like to give you the chance and the floor right now, Maria, to maybe say some closing words, maybe something that hopefully could help us see a positive perspective, something that we could work towards, maybe something that we could go and do right now to make it better for ourselves and for young people we work with.
Great, thank you. Well, there are a lot of things I would, first of all, I love the question. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try answer each one of them separately on a document or something at some point, and we can post this. That would be great. So for the closing of this, there's so many things I'd like to close about. For me is to understand that we are so much more than our stories. And we are so much more than what everybody has told us that we are and we can do. And this is not fluffy, positive self-talk and positive psychology. I'm not this kind of person. Is us really taking responsibility of how great we are as human beings, and stop and training ourselves to stop believing this voice in our head again and again and again and again. For me, that's where it starts, is being present and observe that there is a voice in my head that is conditioned by everything in my life that is telling me the opposite of what I feel I am. If there is a first step, is to actually acknowledge this ego voice, to stop identifying with that. Stop believing that everything that is coming in our minds, 60,000 thoughts a day, are somehow representative of who we are. This is, and they're all repetitive and they're all past-based or future-based. So staying present, learning to stay present. If our natural state of being is calmness, being present, and being joyful, this is how we survive, right? By being this. If this is our natural state of being and we're far off from this, how can I get back to it? That is a very essential question. If my survival depends on me being calm and cool, and I'm not, how can I get back to it? What happened to me? What happened in my head? What is happening inside me that convinces me all the time that this is not the place to be, right? So normalizing this aspect, normalizing coming back to me, and that my experiences are valid, no matter what. There's so much gaslighting out there, so much conviction of people that they're not good enough and right, that it's really sad that we're losing all this creativity.
Thank you very much, Maria.
Mm-hmm.
Before we adjourn for today, and before we say the final words of thank you, first of all, I would like to give now the floor to Olaja, our graphic recorder. I bet you had forgotten about her by now, but she has been working tirelessly in the background to try to capture the main messages from today's talk in her graphic recording. Olaja, are we ready?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Super. So I will be sharing the first nuggets, I would say, of this very impressive sharing, because we had so many, let's say, pieces regarding a lot about what true self is and what does it really mean to find our true self. We have been talking a lot about what a good enough environment is, or how we can build it. What are these elements that are necessary, and what happens when any of these are not present, and how does this reflect into the behavior or the feelings of an individual, perhaps the youth we work with. Then we also made quite a few stops regarding the survival mode and trauma. What is trauma? And then how does this affect us as well? And also, what is trauma? What is not sometimes understood as trauma, but has the same effects or the same consequences as it. And we finished up with the healthy sense of agency. So Maria gave us tips what we should try to do, what steps we should try to take to find this true self, to find this balance, and to allow ourselves to also ask for help and to acknowledge our realities and our sometimes issues or characteristics.
Oh my God, Olaya, this is fantastic. Wow.
And I know it's always difficult to impress even more after Olaya, but I will pass now the floor to Paavo because he has some important announcements of what else can be expected in this wider program on mental health and well-being that we have just started with the partnership of national agencies. Please, Paavo, you have the floor.
Hey, Paavo.
Thanks, Anna. I just want to say that since we have only started our long-term process to promote mental health in youth work, there's not that much really as an information to give. But to give you an idea what we're going to do, first of all, we also think that mental health is a bit of like a life skill. So there are things that you can learn and you can take care about. Yeah. And we are trying to create this kind of training module for youth workers who can there learn these skills and pass them on to their young people. Then there are other things happening. In May, we will organize a large event to start our project in Portugal. So keep your eyes on the website that I shared on the chat, because that's the place where we are going to collect all the mental health related trainings. And if you are selected to this kind of training, if you're working with young people, then all the expenses are normally paid. So participating in them is free.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Paavo. Thank you very much, Maria. Thank you very much to these 100 people who have stayed.
Thank you, guys. You've been amazing. Thank you, all of you.
And thank you very much to people who have been following our live stream on Facebook. Very, very soon in your mailboxes, you will receive all the resources connected to this ID talk. And let's not forget that this was the first one in this season, and we have just started to talk about mental health and well-being in youth work. So please come back every second Wednesday, 1 p.m. Central European time. We will be happy to connect. We will be happy to hear, and we will be happy to share. Thank you very much, Maria. Thank you
guys. Last comment. Remember, piggybacking on Paavo, mental health and well-being is a life skill. It's not the matrix where we take a pill and then we get it, right? We need to practice on this. So remember this. We need to do this way. Thank you. Thank you again for staying.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.